Shalom, WJC family. Time for our weekly Torah Talk. This week in synagogue, we are reading Parshat Va-Etchanan, the second one in the book of Deuteronomy. Moses in the whole book is delivering his sort of final speech to the people, helping them understand how they are supposed to behave once they get into the promised land, especially because he won't be there. In this parsha, Moses is sharing some highlight events. He started it even in the week before. He explains the revelation at Sinai, which he calls Chorev, and the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 utterances coming out. Remember, those are often translated the 10 commandments, but it's really the 10 utterances, principles given, in this case, not so much legalistically, but as principles by which to follow, most of which will be explained further or were explained further in other parts of the Torah. We also have Moshe reviewing philosophies that will be important to the people, most notably the Shema and the V'ahavta, those central prayers of our people, or those passages from the Torah which have become central to the prayer of the Jewish people. They appear here as well. The question is, this is Moshe's last shot to convince the people and explain to the people who they are supposed to be as Jews. The question is, why these items? Why are these the things that Moshe leads with as he's getting his speech going? It seems that he is trying to explain that through these shared experiences, like Revelation at Sinai, sort of probably the formative event along with the Exodus, or as a culmination of the Exodus from Egypt, that formed the Jewish people into the Jewish people, as opposed to sort of a clan religion of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their families. And these philosophical ideas that are going to mandate who the people are. And it is important, I think, that the commandments are given non-casuistically, meaning the Aseret HaDibrot are not laws with consequences, but legal principles or value statements as a society. Because so much of Jewish history will be formed as sort of an opt-in religion without a lot of consequences. Especially Rabbinic Judaism is this, after the destruction of the Second Temple. As Rabbinic Judaism sort of prospers, and there's no longer legal means, sovereign means, even to some extent, it's hard to know, Jewish courts existed within the societies in which they were, but it's hard to say how much real authority they had. And so in this moment, as we just commemorated Tisha B'Av, the destruction of the temple on Tuesday, and this Shabbat, we turn the page to Shabbat Nachamu, this Shabbat of comfort. I think there's comfort in the principles that Moses gives us in Va-Etchanan. And so I want to share a little bit of those ideas today. I want to use two books to do so. One is a book by Liel Leibovitz, How the Talmud Can Change Your Life. Liel was a guest of our synagogue earlier in the year, and in the introduction of this wonderful book really helps to make Talmud accessible to many more people than might otherwise think it's for them. And he says there's universal principles in this that would be useful to all people. He says the Talmud, in its arguments that often do not come to conclusions, right, just like the Aseret HaDibrot, right, no specific consequences, but more principles given. The Talmud tells us how to think, right? A crash course in reasoning, and simple reasoning, not so much like deep philosophy or Greek philosophy, which would have been popular among the world the rabbis were living in. Tells us what to think about, right? That everyday life and all manner of ways that we engage with the world are included, right? The religion is not just about religious stuff, but Judaism pervades all aspects of life and allows us to feel our spirituality in that we find in the Talmud. And most importantly for this that we are all in this life together, that these rabbis who disagree constantly still find a way to live together, right? And it's less about being wrong and being right and more about how they can enhance each other's thinking through the debate, which often takes place through generations as editors compile different opinions on a subject and make the story as if those rabbis are directly disagreeing with one another. But ultimately, the Talmud comes out with the principle, Elu ve'elu, Hem devarim Elohim chayim, right? All these and all those, they're all the words of the living God. And I think that's important as we consider this, how we move forward through the world, right? That it needs to be encompassing, that this is not an exclusive kind of thing, but we're all in this together. Right, the famous story about the two people traveling on a boat, and one guy takes out a hand drill and is drilling down a hole in the boat, and the guy says, "What are you doing? You can't drill a hole in the boat." And he says, "Well, what's it to you?" Right? Because obviously the consequences of what we do have ripple through the society in which we find ourselves. Another book I've been making my way through is a new narrative theology published by Rabbi Irving Greenberg, one of the great thinkers of contemporary Judaism, The Triumph of Life. And amid the principles that he shares about this is that, from the biblical period and the prophetic period, we feel this pulling away of God, right? We don't get direct revelation anymore. But he says, ultimately, that God is more present when hidden. He says God became more hidden, but actually more present. The divine presence had to be discerned, uncovered, and embraced, as if the Israelites stood at Sinai again at a more mature level. Right, that every day now can be a Sinai-like experience, like the one that Moshe is talking about in our Parsha. Henceforth, their future exoduses would have to be initiated by their actions, and their future revelations discerned by their minds through study. Now humans were called to a higher level of partnership. Human behavior had greater impact. Wise judgment and responsible policies, not simply repentance and divine favor, would now lead to favorable historical outcomes. And Rabbi Greenberg goes on to say we're actually even evolving from there. But for now, this is the important part, right? We have to opt into this system when God is not so close, when we might not necessarily see the effects immediately of our opting into the system, right? Doing mitzvot, we talk about it as a legal system, but as a legal system with only spiritual consequences in this day and age, which is something different and we have to opt into. And that ultimately was my message on Tisha B'Av, and my message as we turn the page from Tisha B'Av to this period of comfort that leads us to Rosh Hashanah. And it's a principle that I think is particularly poignant in this moment. I was recently having a conversation with colleagues, and the philosophy of Charles Taylor, a Canadian philosopher, came up. And Taylor presents a critique of individualism, right? Most of modern philosophy was about raising up the rights of the individual to be and to do whatever they want. And, unless it clashed with other people's rights to be and to do whatever they want. That's a basic principle of contemporary philosophy, mostly a good one, right? Our country and its freedoms are based on that idea. However, Taylor brings up the idea that we can't do that without taking into account the society in which the individual grows up or evolves or learns, because of the influence of that society on what they will want to do, and ultimately their influence back on that society. Thus, the principal question that we should be asking ourselves, according to that, is not who am I, which is the principal question of individuality, right? Who am I? Who do I want to be? What do I want to do? And how do I get that done? But in fact, the question, and a much more Jewish question, I think, in this case, is what am I a part of? Judaism respects the individual, right? Everyone is made b'tselem Elohim, but the story doesn't end in the garden. when we're told that. The story doesn't end with creation. We have the revelation at Sinai. We have Moshe speaking to us in the desert as he does in Parshat Va-Etchanan. We have the shared successes and the shared traumas of thousands of years of history. And the question with everything going on in the world, the anti-Semitism, the situation in Israel, the turmoil in politics in this country and in so many countries around the world, the question we should be asking ourselves is, in fact, not who am I, but what am I a part of? What am I a part of? What is important to me about what I am a part of? And what am I going to do about it? I wish you a Shabbat Shalom and look forward to hearing your reflections on those questions.